Welcome to the Friends of Dan Music Podcast. I'm Dan Miles. You've been listening to the dynamic duo of drummer Nate Morton and multi-instrumentalist Sean Halley, aka Fraudprophets. Longtime listeners will remember Nate's previous appearances on the show. Back on episode 47, we spoke about his experiences as the house drummer for NBC's The Voice, and we also spoke about his solo album Playground Philosophy. Then on episode 123, we talked about his collaboration with Kenwood Anderson, Funky Jazzy Stuff, which they released in 2017. So anyone interested in those particular topics is encouraged to go back and check out those episodes, because today we're going to focus exclusively on Nate's current project. So let's get right into that. Joining me on the Skype from Los Angeles, California, is our good pal, Nate Morton. Welcome back.
Hey, Dan. Thank you for having me back. It is a pleasure always to chat with you.
And also joining us from LA, we have Nate's fellow prophet, Sean Halley. Welcome, Sean.
Thank you. I've never actually been referred to like that, and it sounds both hilarious and awesome.
Well, it's nice to have you guys on the show. I look forward to digging into this album. But before we do that, right out of the gate, I've got a question for you, Sean.
Yes.
I find there are two types of people. There's those who can answer this immediately, and then there's those who have to stop and really think about it. And my intuition is you're likely going to be that second type. So the question is this. How many guitars do you own?
33.
Is that real, or is that just...
No, that's real. There's it basically, for being a session guy for a really long time, I had, I've always had a pile of instruments that do different things just to make sure that I can make sort of the right kind of noises. Now, those aren't ones that I play all the time. So there are tons and tons sitting in cases in closets. There are old, 50s jazz guitars from Gibson and nylon string instruments I don't pull out very often, or lap steels or mandolins or things like that. But yeah, in general, there are usually about 33 instruments around here.
Then I need to amend my statement. I said there's two kinds of people. Now I've discovered there's three kinds of people. There's people like me who can instantly tell you how many guitars they own, because we don't own that many. There's people like Rusty Anderson. When he was here, I said, how many guitars do you own? He goes, too many. He didn't want to tackle the chore of trying to come up with an accurate figure, but he estimated over 30. Now we know there's a third kind of guy, somebody who owns over 30 guitars and actually knows right off the top of his head how many. So I'm actually pretty impressed by that.
Well, I'm scared because I think knowing Rusty and his sort of amazing history, I'll bet that he just was softballing and probably has more like 70, and he's probably got a couple like storage units out in Rancho Cucamonga somewhere that he's forgotten about.
You're probably right, but you know, a guy like that who makes his living off guitar, we'll let him have 70 guitars.
Oh no, and he's awesome. That guy's great. I've always been a real big fan of his playing.
Also, you know, I'm not in this boat myself, but when you reach a certain level of prominence, I imagine people start throwing instruments at you.
I've never had that happen. I've heard of this amazing thing where people just go, "Hey, have this guitar." I've heard about this, but unfortunately, it's never really happened for me.
Well, that's
Hey, Dan?
Yeah.
Once upon a time, someone said to me, they said, hey, man, how many kids do you have? And I said, you know what? I don't really know. I don't really count them. I don't really know. And they said, you don't know? And I said, no, I really don't know. And they said, you don't know how many kids you have? And they actually said, how many kits you have? And I thought they had said, how many kids do you have? And I was telling them that I did not know how many kids I had.
And I actually figured that out as you were telling the story. Because the fact that they wouldn't let you the fact that they kept pressing you not to say it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, hey, you know, again, hopefully this doesn't apply to three of us. There are musicians out there who don't know how many kids.
I think.
Yes, I know all too well how many kids I have.
I played a gig in Sioux Falls last year. I don't know. Maybe something happened. I don't quite know, but
Anyway, sorry.
So as someone who's familiar with playground philosophy, funky, jazzy stuff, and the new one, you know, obviously I'm going to be gauging the similarities and the differences between them. You know, playground philosophy, that covered a lot of different genres and featured Nate as a vocalist in a variety of settings. Funky, jazzy stuff and Poptosis are both instrumental albums, but I suspect the main thing they all have in common is that creative freedom to just play whatever and however and whenever you want without anybody telling you, no, don't do that. So is this a continuation of that outlet for you, Nate?
It absolutely is, Dan. And by the way, I don't know if you read the liner notes or if I would have mentioned it, I believe, but you realize that Sean is actually the better part of playground philosophy as well.
My next line on my outline here said, I know Sean was involved with playground philosophy.
So yes. So yeah, that's absolutely the idea. I spend a lot of time doing what's required of me, and I enjoy doing it. I enjoy playing music in you know, pretty much all contexts. But for balance, it is fun to have an opportunity where no one is saying that's too fast or that's too funky or no, you can't play that polyrhythm here. If I knew any polyrhythms to play. So this is another extension of that, and this one is very close to my heart because Sean and I have known each other for about 1 million years, and like literally, not a day goes by that someone doesn't bring up this record or I listen to the record and I think, how did we know each other for 20 years before, you know, doing this project together? So I'm really stoked and very excited, and yeah, as always, you know, happy to work with Sean and, you know, explore. It's fun.
Now I'm wondering if you actually have a secret copy of my outline, because after the sentence, I know Sean was involved with playground philosophy. It says, based on various sources, I've deduced you met at someone else's session around 2003. And you guys were like, you know what? 16 years from now, we should do an album together.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. We sort of met.
We've told this so many times that I feel like a married couple.
I know, totally.
Like
totally.
I feel like Sean knows like the accurate rendition and I don't, so I just kind of be quiet and I let him tell. Like, so how did you guys meet? It's like, well, we were on a double date, and you know, it's like that. So I'll let Sean explain now without interrupting him.
It's true. No, it's we met working on Michael Thompson's MT Speaks records. I had been doing I've been basically helping him out with some technical stuff. He's a wonderful musician and one of the most successful studio guitar players of the last 30 years, but not a technical cat when it comes to things like computers and recording and tape machines and all that kind of stuff. And he was going through a pretty heavy transition, scary transition, trying to get onto modern recording techniques.
Was he still recording to like a tape machine?
No, he was using that crazy Tascam MX2424 machine that worked like a tape machine but was actually digital.
I vaguely recall this.
Yeah, it's like everyone.
And you helped him. Did you help him into the world of Pro Tools?
And all that kind of stuff. Yeah, basically lots of Michael's friends, if they would have known that all they had to do to get him onto Pro Tools was just like basically make the Tascam break, they would have done it for. That's how. And don't get me wrong, I worked at Tascam for a while. That's how I actually met him, and I love everybody over there. But that machine was fraught with some interface issues. But anyway, so Nate came over to track some drums, and
And we hung out.
We hung
waited
out.
for Michael, and
Yep. And
there you go.
There you go.
And also, in fairness to you guys, in terms of meeting in '03 and recording, and I'm sure you guys worked on this on and off for a little while, but I mean, the years. I can't believe Nate's first appearance on the show was like 7 years ago. I can't believe you were here last 2 years ago. It seems like months to me, not years.
Yeah, definitely.
At this point, I'm pretty much of the opinion that if I say I'm going to do something, I pretty much just need to do it, or else I'll look up and it's been 6 months. Like I don't know where the time goes now. It is absolutely insane.
Well, that's fortuitous that you guys met, and you never know who you're going to connect with. It isn't always about connecting musically. A lot of time it's personally, and then when the two things come together. Because I mentioned to you, Sean, a while ago that your playing kind of reminded me of guys like John Harrington. And, a lot of guys have been in and out of the Steely Dan gig, and I think the reason he's been there so long is not because of his playing, which is amazing, is because of his personality. He's real quiet, and he just clicked with Walter and Donald. They probably liked having him around because he was like low maintenance, you know what I mean?
There's I spent a long time doing sessions for a living, and if you think about the kind of pressure cooker that a commercial music session could be, because I didn't really do a lot of records as a session musician. I did a lot of records as a producer, but as a session musician, I did a lot of commercial stuff. And if you're talking about a situation where you've got an orchestra in the room with 40 people and a conductor there and a bunch of other people, that's $4,000 or $5,000 an hour that someone is spending, and they want to make sure that everyone involved in that is a cool hang because it's such a high pressure thing. So I know that when I started playing sessions for a living in '97, I read as good as anybody in town did, and I played differently. Not as well as some guys, and certainly better than other guys. But I know that I had new jokes, and I smelled good, and I was a cool hang. I mean, and so much of that is really important. And it's like, I tell the story. I went to see Nate's finale on The Voice last season, and was just blown away at in between every commercial break, there's like 90 guys that come out to move these sets around, like 90 grips that are just swarming on stage to move these sets from one place to the next. And you think about a band leader. You want to make sure that everybody on that stage is just rock solid and you can depend on them with your life. And that's why guys like Nate, certainly continue to be in that situation. So yeah, the hang is important. The reliability and the trust is important. And then, definitely the personality things have to be the right personalities. It's not necessarily that you have to be a certain kind of personality to be successful in the business. It's more like, your personality has to click with somebody else. Some people really like talking a lot, and some people want to be silent. And if someone's silent, it's like, oh, was he mad at me? What's the problem? And other people are like, wow, I wish that guy would fucking shut up. So it's situational.
But yeah, backtracking to you going to The Voice, I think we can all agree that of the three of us, Nate is the superstar, and he's slumming like with hanging out with me.
Oh,
and
totally.
You.
Stop.
Totally slumming.
We're not worthy.
Stop it.
No, I remember the story Nate told last time about his sons asking if he was famous because they were hoping by extension that made them famous.
that was my eldest, Miles.
I had a moment like that with my youngest son. I had put some piano playing on YouTube, and he goes, "You're on YouTube? Are you famous?" And you could tell the same thing. He was hoping that if I was, that he was too. So.
Yes.
Yeah.
Miles has gotten a little bit of mileage out of that. Like, I'll be at Universal. Well, we work on the Universal backlot for The Voice, and I'll be at Universal, and I'll get a text from him in the middle of the day. Dad, are you at work today? Yeah. Cool. Can I come by? Sure. You just want to come by and see your dad? Yeah. Okay, cool, Miles. I'll put you on the drive-on list. Oh, by the way, there's a girl with me. Her name is, Zena. Can you put her on too? Sure, Miles. Then I get it.
Yeah. Can you give me a +10?
Uh-huh.
Oh God, that's awesome. What better lever to pull for when you're a young 19-year-old guy trying to impress chicks? Just, hey, look, there's Christina Aguilera. Oh, that's awesome.
If my dad was a drummer on The Voice, I'd be milking it too.
Oh, totally. Wow. Totally. There's no blame there. That's gamesmanship. You got to applaud the kid.
Coolness. Well, let's get the origin story now on this recording alias, Fraudprophets. Who's coming up with that phrase?
That's all Sean. Sean came up with that name.
Well, I had this list of band names that was sort of sitting in my laptop, and when we needed a list, we sort of thought about the fact that we're both sort of click guys and session dudes and lovers of all sorts of musical styles and with big wide ears and want to pay homage to the genres that we like to play accurately, but we're also not wizard level on any one genre or whatever, especially the more, the harder ones. So when we were thinking of a name, it felt like, all right, well, we're kind of fraudulent funk guys, and we're kind of fraudulent jazz guys.
We listen to the record. We listen to the record ourselves, and we sort of chuckle and kind of go like, wow, we kind of sound like
we fooled them.
Some of those guys.
Yeah, we do that all the time. We'll listen to something and go, I'll be goddamn, I actually sound like I have some idea of what's going on.
Do you find that you have to convince yourself or try to trick yourself into not realizing that it's you playing in order to go, oh, that sounds pretty cool?
Yeah. Definitely.
And then do you find that the second you come to the realization that it's you go, oh, yeah, that's not,
totally.
It's not happening.
Totally. The imposter syndrome.
I do that all the time.
Yeah,
like people have played me things that I've tracked before.
Yeah.
And I'll go, wow, who's this drummer? This guy sounds all right. Yeah. And they'll go, dude, that's you. That's from the thing that we did back in, 2012. And I'll go, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, it doesn't sound good. And then immediately you start hearing things.
Yeah.
So
I've apologized to producers that they've had to bring in extra people. Hey, man, I'm really sorry you had to bring in somebody to play those power chords.
Right. No,
on
that's
that
you,
section.
Dude.
I should have thought about it at the time. It's
no,
like,
man, you played that.
That's you, dumbass. I'm like, oh.
And you go, oh, cool.
Oh, yeah, cool. Oh,
good
yeah.
idea. I'm glad I thought of that.
What I totally relate to what you're saying about that authenticity thing, because I could picture myself in a session. They go, well, can you play like classical harpsichord? And a player going, well, not really, but I can fake it. Can you play like slap funk bass? Well, usually I play the upright jazz bass. I can probably, make something that sounds like that. And you're kind of imitating at it. But if you got someone like Bob Marley playing reggae, he has a gravity and an authenticity that other people aren't going to have doing reggae, but we can all sort of play a scratch rhythm on the guitar, and a drummer can probably figure out that type of beat. So in my opinion, all that really matters is the end result,
Right, and I should interject too. Sorry, Shawnee, but I should interject too. We're not parodying,
No.
like jazz fusion players or any of that. It's kind of just like what we played falls into that category by virtue of the fact that we allow ourselves to kind of go wherever we want to go with it. But at the same time, where we do go with it is coming from a place of sincerity. It's coming from like, oh, I grew up listening to rock and funk and also some straight ahead jazz and also some, Latin jazz, let's say. Also, I played country, a lot of country on the show. So we allowed, the influences that affect the end result of the record are all sincere influences. At no point did we sit down and go, let's try to sound like the, Mike Stern, Bob Berg band, So yeah.
Yeah, I think that the thing that really is something that Nate and I really bonded over from a very early point was that we both loved everything. Like we could talk about weird records that were in all these weird little genres, and we loved them. It's not like, oh, we sort of file them away as something we'll sort of parody or something later. It was more like, oh, I really love this record. It would be fun to incorporate some of these ideas.
Hey, Dan.
Yeah.
What's the first record you ever bought?
Well, we did an entire podcast on that subject, so the answer for me was Elton John, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road.
Right.
Awesome.
Mine was Kiss Dynasty, which came out in 1978. I bought that record when I was 6 years old, 7 years old, something like that. What was yours, Johnny?
First record I owned was Elvis Costello, This Year's Model, and then B-52's Wild Planet. But the first record I fell in love with was Yellow Brick Road on my parents' turntable.
Right. Now, the reason why I asked that question, Dan, and this relates back to what we were talking about, is that to this day, I still carry memories and still in the DNA of my musical, experience is Kiss Dynasty, much like the Yellow Brick Road is to you, much like Sean's first records were to him. And so I guess what I mean when I say all that is just to say all those influences are allowed to flourish on this record that Sean and I were just fortunate enough to make together.
Yeah.
And just to sort of annoy Nate, Sean, have you ever gotten to work with Elton John?
No, although Greg Penny, one of his producers, I love the guy, and I've wanted to get back a hold of him because, Elton was such a big influence on my pop writing.
Right.
And haven't been able to hook up with him in a really long time. But I wanted to get him a copy of this because I think he'd really like it.
Yeah, and I haven't worked with Elton either. Nate, have you ever worked with anyone from Kiss?
Well, funny you should ask. It's so random that you would come with that question completely off the cuff like
well
that,
done,
Dan.
Well done, sir.
As a matter of fact, I had the good fortune of working with Mr. Paul Stanley, the lead singer of Kiss.
Said it before, I'll say it again. We're not.
Paul Stanley, by the way, I can't say this enough. Paul Stanley is one of the most amazing, like, I was going to say artists just now, but I'm just going to say he's one of the most amazing dudes that I know.
Right.
If you've ever been in the presence of someone who is fully aware that they are legendary, but is able, like, or are able to have that self-awareness without being
a douche,
jerks. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I mean, the guy, I could tell stories, but I won't go down that road. But great guy. I still chat with him to this day. I'll randomly get a text from him, cool performance on the show tonight.
That's
and
awesome.
I'm like, Paul Stanley just texted me. It's amazing. So yeah, Paul's great. I can't say enough great things about him.
Yeah, I only have one real sort of instance of sort of meeting somebody and hanging with somebody and actually working with him for a minute, of somebody who was a very early, like really strong influence that I didn't think I would ever meet. And that's Trevor Rabin from Yes. And it was surreal to help Trevor put his rig back together and have Trevor tell me stuff to play. And he was like, yeah, Sean, do some sweeping. I'm like, Trevor, I'm not going to sweep pick in front of Trevor Rabin, for God's sake, really? And he's like, no. You just
Where did you work with him?
At his place. He was setting up for the AWS tour, or the AW, that's Anderson, Wakeman, Rabin, AWR tour.
Okay.
A couple years
Okay.
ago. Yeah.
The first time I ever met Paul, we got together. It was the band meeting Paul and Doc McGee, who was managing. Yeah. And Paul came in. It was at a restaurant somewhere in Beverly Hills, probably. And like, it was almost like Paul's entrance.
Paul Stanley.
Yes. Yeah. Paul Stanley's entrance was almost like in the Old West, like in the Old West movies. And it was like, boom, like kick open the saloon doors, boom. And it's like, you just see like the silhouette of him, because he's like backlit and he kind of emerged from the shadows. And it was almost like, I swear, it was hilarious. It was almost like there was an imaginary fan about 3 feet in front of him that was constantly just like blowing his like flowing locks back and everything. It was incredible. So anyway,
that's awesome. So awesome.
For me, the name Fraud Prophets, my interpretation was, we may have overextended, but who cares? So what? That was kind of my take on it. It's like, you guys are great players, and no one's going to go, I don't know about that little moment there at, 3:37 on that one track. It felt a little fraudulent. I don't think so.
Exactly. I wasn't quite finding the authenticity there.
The rest of it's fine, but that little 3-second run there, I just wasn't.
That's not what Chris Potter would have done, you loser.
That's right. Yeah, I'm sure that's what everybody thinks when they listen to your album. Losers.
Yeah.
But, you guys do have an opportunity, because, if I was you and people were placing orders, I'd send out blank CDs. And then when they complain, I'd say, hey, it's right there in our name, Fraud. Well, we also have to get the explanation of the word poptosis.
So the cover art was painted by a artist from Helsinki, Finland, named Robert Kosinius, and he's one of my favorite modern sort of guys. He's got a lot of African influence in what he does, and I think he's really awesome. And the only reason I know about him is because 10 years ago, I sold him a really expensive guitar pedal on eBay when he was 16. And I've kept in touch with him and his mom over Facebook and Instagram and stuff over the years. And I started looking at his work last year or 2 years ago and just started thinking, God, I think this is really awesome. And I saw one piece and it looked like there was sort of a white dude and a black dude. And the black dude was kind of dressed up like a superhero. And I thought, I really would love to be able to take that and make that the cover. And he had another painting that was further up in his portfolio. And it had all of these terms, some medical terms. And it was like, anyway, I can't think of all the medical terms, but one of them was apoptosis. And apoptosis is actually programmed cell death. It's the method in which your body gets rid of dead tissue. And I just thought, well, if we just took the A off and called it poptosis, this record would sort of like, it's the anti-pop record. It's the diseased pop record. I think that's actually pretty.
I'll go with that. Now that's
Nate has a different.
I do. I take it a little bit differently, but then isn't that the beauty of interpretation?
What's yours?
Well, I mean, to me, it's kind of this idea that even though the record has many, many elements, as we've discussed at great length now, and a lot of those elements are jazz or they're funk or they're whatever influence, ultimately, Sean and I come out of a sort of a pop school in the sense that, we think in terms of singable melodies and catchy, lines and lyrics and so on. And so even in the context of going like, oh, this will be a jazz record and we'll take solos here and whatever, all of that, even in that context, we can't escape our pop roots or our roots in songs, if you will.
Yep.
And so that comes through. So it's almost like, oh, I'm sorry. I don't want to be the one to break this to you, but you've come down with a case of poptosis. Inexplicably, no matter what you attempt to do, it still comes out melodic and singable.
Yeah. Even
when you attempt to play extremely notey and crazy licks and complex polyrhythms, it's still very mainstream accessible. I'm sorry. So that's kind of the way that I look at it.
I think that's a far better explanation than mine, by far.
Well, interestingly, what you just said about the album cover has been a trend here on recent episodes because Mark Bonilla and Don Breithaupt have both been on the show recently, and they both had album covers that were based on, in Don's case, a photographer. It was a photo of a winter night in Times Square from the 1950s that he really loved. And Mark, it was more of like sort of a computer graphic-y, colorful, surreal kind of thing. And Mark's an artist himself, but he just really loved it and knew that's got to be my album cover as soon as he. So you're the third person who said that you saw something and you just really wanted it to be your album cover. That's cool. Yeah,
it's cool, and it felt like it kind of described visually a little bit kind of the record and visually, and it's got two obvious dudes on it and a couple cocktail shakers, so it felt like it was pretty apropos.
Yeah, and of course on Funky Jazzy Stuff, Nicole, Nate's wife, did the art.
This is true.
Yep, which is cool.
And speaking of Don Breithaupt, on the Monkey House album, it wasn't the album title, but within some of the lyrics, he coined this term Poptopolis. And
ooh, nice. Ooh, yeah, very nice.
For him, it was a song about a jazz guy who only cared about jazz. So a Poptopolis was like a mainstream pop environment that he felt above and wanted to escape from. So he just kind of slipped. He just kind of slipped that into the lyrics. But I definitely wanted to ask him about it. And I figure, since you guys came up with Poptosis and Don came up with Poptopolis, I tried to come up with one of my own. I came up with Poptagon.
And is that like a 12-sided pop record?
Here's my definition of Poptagon. It's any geometric shape that's under 30 and auto-tuned.
Nice.
Thought you guys
well done.
Okay, that's pretty good actually. That's good. Not a it's some sort of dodecahedron that looks like it might dress in lycra and smell nice. That's Poptagon's pretty darn good. That's pretty darn good.
Well, I love the fact that we've been talking for about 40 minutes and we still haven't gotten to any specific tracks.
Yeah, well, you said earlier that we would chat for somewhere between 40 minutes to an hour, and I just thought, dream on, Dan.
And Nate was concerned he wasn't going to talk enough on this podcast. Oh, Sean and I were not worried about that.
Never.